Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another morning of Blue Ridge Furfare. I'm Three Retired Rabbits, and I wanted to talk to you this morning about Watership Down. Watership Down is the reason why I'm here. It's the thing that made me an anthropomorphic. Back then, they weren't called furries. I read it when it first came out, and I was immediately blown away. I was a science fiction fan, and I was used to non-human characters, but very often they were just human beings inside the guise, the flesh of an alien species. You know, they thought like humans, they acted like humans. Watership Down, these were rabbits. They thought like rabbits, they acted like rabbits. And it forced me to really rethink what I considered anthropomorphic literature, and made a huge impact on my life. This is something my wife got me for our 40th wedding anniversary, and it's just another copy of the book, except I don't know if you guys can see that very well, but she got me an autographed copy. I took her the better part of a year to find this. She kept it a secret from me until our anniversary. Big feels. Anyway, let me go ahead and start. Okay. The presentation. Oops. Hang on a second. I have to click a window right there, and okay. So it's been 49 years since this book came out. That's a huge amount. I realize some of you only know this from the movies. Yeah, some of you only know this from the movies, and there's some folks who only know it from the Netflix. I kind of predate all that. By the same token, my first Doctor was the first Doctor. You know, I predate Star Trek. When I was a little kid, sci-fi on TV was the Twilight Zone. So back in the beginning, Richard Adams. Richard Adams was an interesting man. He lived an interesting life. He was in World War II. He was called up in 1940. He was 2 years into college at the time, and he was reading in the classics at the time. That kind of shows if you've read the book. He went to the Airborne, and he served as a brigade liaison. He was assigned several different places. Obviously, he started his military service in England. Then he went to the Middle East. Specifically, he went to what we now call Israel. Back then, it was called Palestine. And after that, he went to the Far East. Now, although he was in a unit that saw combat, he himself did not. So he put himself out there. Everybody in an airborne unit basically is prepared to go fight. And it was at a time when Britain was in a fight or die situation. But while he did not see combat himself, he talked with a lot of people who did. He had a lot of friends who did, and it had an impact on him. He came back, and he finished his when he got out of the Army, he finished his studies, got his degree, and then he went to government service, and he basically stayed in government service until he died, and would have otherwise lived an honorable but basically unremarkable life. Now, he got married, and he had children. He had some daughters, and what would happen is, like so many English, he would pop them in the car on the weekends. They'd go out for a drive to the country and drive through the hills and the valleys and such. And he would tell them stories about the rabbits. And what happened was, as he got older and he had told more and more and more of the stories, he kind of wove them all together. And his daughters insisted that he write them all down. So he started doing that. And while Adams was a man who had written a lot in his job as a civil servant, he was constantly writing reports and such. But they were, obvious statement, nonfiction, very, very formatted, no real requirement for, flowery language. So writing the book took him back to the type of writing that he had not done since college in his studies of classics and of literature. Now, one thing that was interesting was he had been basing his characters off of his understanding of rabbits, and he ended up deciding that he didn't know enough, so he got a hold of a book called The Private Life of the Rabbit by R.M. Lockley. Now, Lockley was a naturalist, and he was quite an expert on the field rabbits of the United Kingdom. And after the book was published, Lockley was flattered, very much flattered, by the fact that in the beginning of the book, Richard Adams actually stops and says, my knowledge of rabbit behavior is based very heavily on The Private Life of the Rabbit by R.M. Lockley. And you can get the book, incidentally. You can get the book if you go out on Alibris or a lot of the used bookstore places. It's not that expensive. I got a copy. It's really an amazing read. It cost me about $6 to buy it. So if you're really into, rabbits and such, it's an amazing read. It'll change a lot of the way you think about rabbits. One thing Lockley brings up is that rabbits are different from a lot of other species. We think that they are afraid of everything, and actually rabbits will do some very brave things. Rabbits are very organized tribally, and there are some rabbits whose job it is to distract, predators while the others can get away. So they will do that knowing that their chance of survival isn't that great. And it's really kind of an amazing thought. There are things rabbits can do that we don't even think about. A rabbit, for example, a pregnant rabbit can reabsorb the litter. Rabbit culture is based around the warren. Rabbits are individuals, but they're not individualists. So really amazing species. I had to include this. I've heard this statement so many times, and I just doing this to disprove this. Watership Down is real. That's a picture of it. That is the actual place, Watership Down. If you look on the right side, past where the slope starts to begin, you can see that copse of trees. So that is the actual Watership Down. So, like I said, a lot of people think he made up the place. Nope. So one of the things that made this different is this is not like a lot of other books where you have Peter Rabbit wearing a jacket and talking with the others in human language and walking upright and stuff. And this is not Redwall, where they're wandering around being all medieval and living in a great abbey. By the way, that came a few years later. Those are great books, but in a huge way, they're zipperbacks. They're humans who act like, who look like rabbits. They're not really rabbits. I mean, I love The Long Patrol. That's probably the most rabbit-centric of Jake's Redwall books. But realism. The most general aim of realism was to offer a truthful, accurate, and objective representation of the real world, both the external world and the human self, or in this case, the rabbit self. And that was one of the things that made this different. I saw somebody in the chat before this started saying that the fighting scenes in there really caused them some pause. And I get that. It is a, oops, I don't know what happened. I just lost the chat. Can you guys still see me? Okay, I'm under the impression you guys can still see me. Uh-oh. Okay. Anyway, I'm hoping you guys can still see me. I'm going to keep going. Apparently you can. Great. Anyway, that's the idea of realism in the book. Sorry about that. I'm not great with the technology. Naturalism, a philosophical viewpoint to which everything arises from natural properties and causes, and supernatural or spiritual explanations are excluded or discounted. Now, obviously there is Frith and the Black Rabbit of Inley, who, by the way, is not evil. That's one thing I really don't like about the movie, is the movie made the Watership Down world, made Inley look like evil death. If you read the book, you realize that the rabbits understand that death is a part of life. I often, I don't know if you can see us, but I wear a shirt sometimes when I go to cons. It's got Frith on it. And I wear that so people can recognize that I know what the book is about. It's kind of my way to see if anybody else has read the book. Natural religion. A religion validated on the basis of human reason and experience, apart from the miraculous or supernatural revelation specifically. A religion that's universally discernible by all men, or in this case, all rabbits, through the use of human reason, apart from any special revelation. The rabbits have a lot of expressions. Rabbit underground, rabbit safe and sound. And a lot of things in their organization, the Ausla, for example, that are very specifically based on their observation of how things work. You could almost say that the rabbits have a feudal society. The Ausla get special privileges because they're the defenders. They are the knight class, if you will. The book itself, this is interesting. I've seen this book, this version of the book, but I could not afford it. It was an autographed copy. I could not afford it. That was one of the things that got me first interested in getting an autographed copy. And I tried for several years, but could not, and gave up. Published in 1972. It was on the New York Times bestseller list for 13 weeks. This is interesting. It has never been out of print. There's always been a demand for this book. And I find that amazing. Richard Adams, when he first published the book, it was a huge thing, which is interesting because he finished the book in 1966, and he submitted it many times, and everybody said, nope. And then all of a sudden, somebody said, yeah, let's go with this. And it suddenly turned into a national bestseller, actually an international bestseller, in England, in the United States. It's actually been published in very many languages. I have a German language copy of it, Unten am Fluss. And it was a bestseller in Germany. I know that. I don't know what other countries it was a bestseller in, but they say international, so I assume all over the place. But this book has been around for a long time. I know this is a young fandom, and I'm an old person. I was born in the Eisenhower administration. But it's just, it's a book that's lasted. It has withstood the test of time. The movie, the animated movie, this is what I have found. I actually did a poll on this once, and most people know this know this story through this movie, the original animated movie. And there are some things that are missing in the animated movie. I love the animated movie. I think they really, really do their best to stick with the meaning of the book. They really, I think, tried to do a faithful adaptation. But a huge part of the book includes the stories that the rabbits tell. The rabbits are a storytelling species like we are. And they recognize, this is an important difference between the book and the movie. The rabbits recognize the importance of story and culture. And the rabbits, even though they are not human and do not have human intelligence, I mean, a rabbit is considered ingenious for realizing how a boat works. Rabbits do not all understand that cars and roadways are associated and that cars are dangerous. That's something that the Owsla know, and they don't tell everybody about the danger of the hredudu. That's their word for car. So rabbits are not of human intelligence, clearly, but they are of lapine intelligence, rabbit intelligence, and they have culture appropriate to that level. This is one of the things that really makes this, in the classical sense of the word, an epic piece of literature, is the investment Adams put into developing rabbit culture. The investment that Adams put in to rabbit culture is profound. You could think of Tolkien with the different languages and alphabets. Obviously, these are not creatures with prehensile limbs, no thumbs, but they developed their own language. We'll get into that in a little bit. So, a huge thing. Now, this criticism does not take anything away from the quality, the value of the movie. It's just saying if you haven't read the movie, read the book, and you loved the movie, you definitely need to read the book. That's probably my big goal here, is read the books. Plural. Now, that was 78. Shortly after that, something interesting happened. There was a thing called GURPS, G-U-R-P-S. It came from Steve Jackson Games, and it was the generic universal role-playing system, G-U-R-P-S, GURPS. And they had GURPS Road Warriors or something like that. They had GURPS Cyberpunk. And within that time period, suddenly, bunnies and burros, role-playing in the world of intelligent animals. This, if you've ever had a chance, it never really caught on as big as it should have. I actually played that game one time back in the day. And one of the things that's interesting is they actually had a gaming combat system for these, for the rabbits in there. And it was referred to as Bun Fu. And it was like, your Bun Fu is weak. But it came up and then it faded. It was interesting. If you went online looking for the bunnies and burros, the PDF was free if you wanted to get it. But while a short search on the internet would get you a free copy of the PDF, if you wanted a copy of the actual book, you'd have to go online and hunt for it, and they could run up to $100 or more. And then what happened was Frog God Games, about a couple years ago, had a internet fundraiser. I forget which thing it was on, whether it was GoFundMe or whatever. But one of them, they came up and said, we want to relaunch this. Now, if you look at it very carefully, you notice You've got Dennis Sestair, Scott Robinson. You'll notice up here, Dr. B, Dennis Sestair, and Dr. Scott Robinson. So obviously, these guys used the time wisely between, but they did relaunch the game. The game is out now. If you want to get it, you can get it. It's upgraded. It's a little smoother now, but it's still essentially the same game. So if you are an RPG person, it's definitely there. It's definitely a fun thing. Now, moving on. This is chronological, as you might have noticed, because right now I'm going to the sequel in 1996. Tales from Watership Down. Now, Tales from Watership Down does have some stuff in it. There's one big change, and that's Heisenflay becomes kind of the co-chief rabbit with Hazel. So some of the stories are way before the events of the first book. Some of them are mythological almost. They include, the first part of the book includes 4 or 5 stories of El Herrera. Elil means enemies. Herrer means many. Ra, of course, is chief. So El Herrera is the prince with 1,000 enemies. Okay? If you saw the book, you hear near the end, they refer to Hazel as Hazel Ra. And that's what that means. Chief, Hazel is the chief rabbit. So Ra. So El Herrera is a corruption of Elil, enemy, Rer, Ra. So, amazing book. It's got a couple of stories talk about El Herrera and Rabscuttle returning from the visit to the Black Rabbit of Inlay, which is something, amazing story that you would not have seen at all unless you read the book. It's not in the movie, and it's really has some profound moments in it. That part of the book, strangely enough, got me through a very, very hard time in my life. The last part of the book, I don't even remember how many it is, but it's talks about stuff that went on in the Watership Down Warren after the end of the original book. Some of them are before Hazel dies, and some of them are after. So, again, if you've read the first book, go for it. You can read the second book. If you haven't read Watership Down, you could read Tales from Watership Down. It wouldn't be like you absolutely won't understand it, but there are a lot of references back to the first book, particularly in the last 2 parts. The first part, just the Tales of El Herrera, those make absolute sense with or without having read the first book. But the second and third parts, when they're returning from the visit, when El Herrera and Rabscuttle are returning from their visit to the Black Rabbit of Inlay, if you haven't read that, if you don't know what that was all about, then it's really missing a lot. Okay. Yes, there was an animated cartoon series. I did something in here. I put 2 pieces in here. You look at on the right side of the screen, you look at the 2 that are stacked. The top one is from the TV series, and the bottom one is from the movie. And that's just so you can look at them and see. You can see that the TV series is far more toony, whereas the other series is more is more naturalistic, is more, for want of a better word, feral. So it's not bad. It's not great. I'll be honest, I feel like it really goes away from the nature of the book, because they didn't want to make anything that was going to terrify children. So, surprise, stage play. It never, to my knowledge, and I looked, it was never produced in the United States. It was never shown in the United States, never made. It was made 2 different places, both in England. So it's about 2 hours long. And no rabbit suits. No fursuits, no nothing. Now, I've actually met people who their only knowledge of Watership Down was from the Netflix. And I think of all the productions of Watership Down, again, I've never seen the play. I haven't read the play. But comparing the books, the gameplay design in Bunnies and Burrows, what little I've seen of the cartoon series, and having watched the entire Netflix a couple of times, I love the animation, but I feel like they go too far away from the story. There was a complaint about the book, that the book downplayed the female characters. There was a complaint, for example, in the book, the rabbits are saying, well, we need to get some does here so they can dig out the hole better. And Hazel sits there and says, well, we don't have any. You guys have to dig. And it's like they're all complaining about women's work, does work. Well, the reality is, with rabbits, females dig the hole. Females dig the hole while the males stand guard. That's part of the behavior of the species. And if Adam's rabbits are sexist, it's because wild rabbits are sexist. So if you look at that and say, well, they were only running out to get does because they just wanted to breed, yeah, that's the truth. That is how rabbits in the wild behave. Rabbits in the wild will run out and look for does. If they don't have enough. Sometimes young males, if there aren't enough does, young males will leave a warren and go out and look for a place where there are females. So, that was something that they tried to work around somewhat. They tried to increase the role of females. One big difference, if you've read them both, is in the Netflix, Heisenplay is the rabbit who goes out looking for Hazel when Hazel's injured. And that is not something that would normally happen. That is something that you would not see with wild rabbits. Wild rabbits, well, first off, to be really honest, if Hazel was injured, they probably would have left him die. Okay, that's cruel, and it doesn't work with the storytelling that Adams wanted. So Fiver, the physically weak rabbit who had mystical visions, Fiver was the one who found him in the book. So I don't want to beat on Watership Down. If anybody gets to Watership Down and reads the books, I'm happy. I think these are amazing books. I wish these books were taught in school. But to be honest, I don't think they would be. They're too violent. They're too violent. Now, I mentioned this earlier, Lapine, the rabbit language. If you look at the best example I can think of is either Brave New World, they have this wonderful explanation of Newspeak that was written, or excuse me, not Brave New World, George Orwell's 1984. They had an explanation of Ingsoc and Newspeak that was really quite amazing. But even more than that, Tolkien, with the appendices that he wrote for the Lord of the Rings trilogy, he actually goes to a great depth into the languages of Middle-earth. Adams created a Lapine language. And I'm not going to, I've mentioned a few words of it already, but this is a great one. Silfleraka huembrera. Eat crap, stinking prince. Near the end of the book, for those who've read it, the Warren is attacked by a massive rabbit, General Woundwort. And he calls in there, hey, surrender. And Bigwig, probably the best fighter in the rabbit, in the Watership group, calls back, Silfle hraka, hu emblera. Silfle, eat. Hraka, pellets, poop. Hu emblera. Ra, of course, is prince or chief. Hu embler, you stinking. So eat crap, you stinking prince. Prince of stink. It's just an amazing language to look at. One more quote. Hoi hoi huemblerer, meson ule rakavrer. Hey, the stinking thousand. We meet them, even when we stop to pass our droppings. We don't like them. We're not going to give them the respect, but we know that they're all over the place. We know that they're all over the place. Even when we stop to poop, they're going to come up and they're going to be around us and get us. Quotes from the book. There's one quote from the book that everybody knows. It's probably the quote from the whole book. And if you saw the original animated movie, or if you saw the Netflix movie, it's both something in the beginning. All the world will be your enemy, prince with 1,000 enemies. And whenever they catch you, they will kill you. But first they must catch you. Digger, listener, runner, prince with the swift warning. Be cunning and full of tricks, and your people shall never be destroyed. It's that line. If they catch you, they will kill you. But first they must catch you. That's probably the line in the movie that everybody knows. The thing is, this book is full. This is my 8th or 9th copy of the book. And I have just, I don't know if you can see that or not, but I have just bookmarked the heck out of it. There's so many great quotes in here. And one of them, there's two that I want to share at length. If you remember the scene when they're digging in there. Okay. See now. Okay, this is Woundwort attacking. He met Woundwort's pale stare, hesitated a moment, then climbed on the earth pile. Woundwort limped across the 2 runs, halfway down the eastern wall, which Groundsel, that's another rabbit who's on Woundwort's side, was told to get open. Both were now clear at the entrances, and the diggers were out of sight in the tunnels. As he approached, Groundsel backed further down the tunnel and began cleaning his claws on a projecting root. How are you getting on? Asked Woundwort. The run's open, sir, but the other will take a bit longer, I'm afraid. It's heavily blocked. One's enough, said Woundwort, as long as they can come down it. We can bring them in and start getting that end wall down. He was about to go up the run himself when he found Vervain beside him. That's one of Woundwort's chief officers. He had told Vervain to go down there and kill Bigwig, and he couldn't. Now, they call Bigwig Flaley. Okay. He was about to go up the run himself when he found Vervain beside him. For a moment, he thought he was going to say that he had killed Flaley. A second glance showed him otherwise. I've got some grit in my eye, sir, said Vervain. I'll just go get it out, and then I'll have another go at him. Without a word, Woundwort went back to the far end of the honeycomb. Vervain followed. You coward, said Woundwort in his ear. If my authority goes, where will yours be in half a day? Aren't you the most hated officer in Ephrafa? That rabbit's got to be killed. Once more he climbed on the earth pile. Then he stopped. Vervain and Thistle, raising their heads to peer past him from behind, saw why. Flaley has made his way up the run and was crouching immediately below. Blood had matted the great thatch of fur on his head, and one ear, half severed, hung down beside his face. His breathing was slow and heavy. You'll find it much harder to push me back from here, General, he said. With a sort of weary, dull surprise, Woundwort realized he was afraid. He did not want to attack Flaley again. He knew with flinching certainty that he was not up to it. And who was, he thought, who could do it? No, they would have to get in by some other way, and everyone would know why. Flaley, he said, we've unblocked a run out here. I can bring in enough rabbits to pull down this wall in 4 places. Why don't you come out? Flaley's reply, when it came, was low and gasping, but perfectly clear. My chief rabbit has told me to defend this run, and until he says otherwise, I shall stay here. His chief rabbit, said Vervain, staring. It had never occurred to Woundwort or any of his officers that Flaley was not the chief rabbit of his warren. Yet what he said carried immediate conviction. He was speaking the truth. And if he was not the chief rabbit, then somewhere close by there must be another, stronger rabbit who was. A stronger rabbit than Flaley? Where was he? What was he doing at this moment? Woundwort and the Ephraphans all figured that he, Flaley, because he was biggest, was the chief. They didn't realize that Hazel, who they had already met, Hazel came to negotiate, and they were going to kill him, and they sent him back to deliver the message to the chief rabbit, failing to realize that he was the chief rabbit. So, an amazing point. Again, this is one of these points where the book and the movie are pretty bloody. Pretty bloody. This is a sad line, but so true. My heart has joined the 1,000, for my friend stopped running today. Every time I see that or hear that, it gets to me. This is Watership Down, for those who are curious. This is a classic of English literature, modern classic. My heart has joined the 1,000, for my friend stopped running today. The 1,000, of course, are all the enemies of the rabbits. So when your heart has joined the 1,000, what you're saying is, my heart has died, for my friend stopped running today. Running is what rabbits do. There's a wonderful quote in there. If you are running, I will run with you. If you're leaving, I'll leave with you. If you're living, I'll live with you. If you're fighting, I'll fight alongside you. If you're running, I'll run with you. When your friend stopped running, means he's died. My heart is joined to the 1,000. For my friend stopped running today. When I was in the war, a friend of mine died. And that was the first thing that I thought of. I heard it on the radio, called in the casualty report. This one does not show up in the movie, any of them. It's from the book. You know how you let yourself think that everything will be all right if only you can get to a certain place or do a certain thing. But when you get there, you find it's not that simple. They had finally arrived. Hazel and the rabbits had finally arrived at Watership Down. They had got to the place. They'd looked around. They'd found there was a small but serviceable abandoned warren that they were going to move into, but it wasn't big enough. So they knew they were going to have to do some stuff with it. But they also knew that they were going to have problems with their Furfare. And they knew there were going to be other problems. They knew that the 1,000 were always there around every corner. So they knew that they were going to have to do more. But some of the rabbits were saying, we're here, that's it, we're done. You know how you let yourself think that everything will be all right if you can only get to a certain place or do a certain thing. When you get there, you find it's not that simple. That's life. Oh, if I can just get through this course. Oh, if I can just survive this pandemic. Oh, if I can do this. Oh, if I can do that. Reality is, it's not. It's not. And that's an amazing thing. The next one, I want to go back to the book yet again. This is one that is marginally in the first animated movie, not at all in the second. But in the movie, it's they reframe it as a conversation with, depending upon how you interpret the movie, either Frith or the Black Rabbit and Hazel. But the reality is it's actually between El Herrera and the Black Rabbit. Now, the Black Rabbit, like we said, is the naturalistic version of death, not the evil death like you see, you know, like a personification of death, Hela in Thor Ragnarok. It's not like that. It's almost like the version of death in Neil Gaiman's Sandman novels, Sandman stories, excuse me, where the death is just an aspect of existence. The El Herrera, the prince with 1,000 enemies, the rabbit folk hero, his warren was being attacked, and they did not have the ability to defend it. So El Herrera and Rabscuttle, his best friend, his buddy, his number 2, went to see the Black Rabbit, and they had tried to compete with him, to bet with him for the ability to save his people. And every bet the Black Rabbit won, and every time he would lose something. He would lose his tail, he would lose his jumping, he would lose his ears. And finally, there's a place where there's a plague going on, and El Herrera decides he's going to go down there and catch the plague and come back and give it to the enemies of the warren so that his warren can live. So, El Herrera, why have you come here? I have come for my people, whispered El Herrera. The Black Rabbit smelled as clean as last year's bones, and in the dark, El Herrera could see his eyes, for they were red with a light that gave no light. You're a stranger here, El Herrera, said the Black Rabbit. You are alive. My lord, replied El Herrera, I have come to give you my life for my people. Bargains, bargains, El Herrera, he said. There is not a day or a night but a doe offers her life for her kittens, or some honest captain of Ausla his life for his chief rabbits. Sometimes it is taken. Sometimes it is not. but there is no bargain. For here, what is what must be. Some people look at that statement as being very pessimistic, or almost nihilistic. What is what must be. If you look at it, from a Judeo-Christian context, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. God is going to do what God is going to do. Nature is going to do what nature is going to do. The universe moves on unmoved by our pleas, by our desires, by our wants. There is no bargain, for what is what must be. Again, it's one of those moments in the book that if you just stop and look at it and think about it, it really, really, really gives you so much back. Got a few minutes left. One of the things about this book is that it's not a zipper-back story. These are rabbits with their own culture based on actual rabbit behavior. And when you stop and look through it, it really gives you a chance to step outside of yourself. I have often found thinking like a rabbit, as funny as that sounds, I've often found that thinking like a rabbit is more useful to me than thinking like a human. A rabbit has to get through every day. The rabbit is not going to beat the fox. Just not. The rabbit has to survive. Survival is victory. If you're in a situation, sometimes you want to sit there and say, I'm going to beat this guy. I'm going to get back at him. I'm going to whatever. No. Survival is victory. The fox does not live in fear of the rabbit. It's the other way around. I mean, we don't all get to be the apex predator. And that's an important difference to understand. Looking at this book gives you a chance, like I said, to step outside yourself, step outside your humanity, and think about that and learn the lessons from other species. This is one of the things that Adams really did. This is also just an interesting point. They talk about, Adams talked about the fact that he did not plan for this book to have any deeper meaning. It was just the stories a father was telling his children. I've seen some people analyze this. If you look at the three different Warrens, the Sandalford Warren in the beginning of the book, he actually referred to it as the Lotus Eaters in the middle, and then Watership Down at the end, you see each of them shows a different example of leadership and of organization. So Adams, really put a lot of things in there. Not only is there a wonderful explanation of rabbit culture and, of rabbit life in the wild, a fascinating development of a culture to understand and their philosophy and their folklore, but there's also an interesting discussion about what constitutes leadership. There are so many points in there. And it's a really amazing book. There are life lessons in this book. And like I said, if you haven't read both of them, there are two books in this. There are two books. If you haven't read both of them, the one thing I'd really love to say is you should read them. That's my big goal in this, is just to say that, especially if you're a prey mammal, 3 retired rabbits, hello. Especially if you're a prey mammal, you should read this book. It will give you an understanding of what it means truly to be a prey animal. Well, I'm trying to see if we've got anything, any questions left in the chat. What is the name of the book? Watership Down and Tales from Watership Down. Someone said they had to read or see the movie in English class. I think that's pretty awesome. We've got just a little bit of time left. I don't see any questions in the chat. Somebody said kapla. Somebody said wrong, Khan. Thank you. Again, this is an amazing book. I have been reading and rereading this book for almost 50 years. And yes, I'm that old. I predate the Beatles, okay? When I was a little kid, Chubby Checker was the big deal. Anyway, when I first read this book, it made a huge impact on me. And every single time I read it, I find something new and wonderful in it. And it is my hope that 100 years from now, this book is still around and it is still as well regarded as it is now. This was really the first anthropomorphic novel in the modern era that really, really, really didn't go the zipperback route, okay? That really made animals that were animals of human level intelligence, but not of human intelligence. Anyway, I don't know how much time we've got left, so I will simply say that I hope everybody enjoys the rest of the convention. I don't have anything to sell or to advertise. I don't have a coffee or anything. I just want you to go out and read this book. So thank you very much. Again, I hope your adventures with this book are as enriching as mine have been. Thank you.